pandemic is disproportionately affecting the most vulnerable around the world. We know how to stop COVID in its tracks, but
these are my kids. Is that you, Jay?
The legend lives on from the Chippewa on down at the big lake they call Gitchagumi.
Had to play it one more time for us. Those of us who know.
When the skies of November turn gloomy.
Oh, Sean Brown, you got here.
With a load of iron
I like it.
6,000 tons more than the Edmund Fitzgerald weighed empty.
I can't believe it's already time. Hey, JP, it's the Beasley.
When the gales of November came early.
Sean Brown, you're here.
The ship was the pride.
JP, now you know this song now.
Coming back from some mill in Wisconsin. As the big freighters go, it was bigger than most.
Nice reading today, JP. Nice reading. You are a master today. It's good. Who else is here? I think it's going to be just 4 of us today. You think other people might sneak on? You're welcome, JP. It was awesome to spend that time. You will want to deal with the doll next week, though. Definitely. Definitely. Oh, oh, more people are coming. Woo-hoo! You're not late yet. Let's see, I want to come down a little bit lower. Yeah. I love this song. We got 45 seconds, you guys. Get yourself comfortable.
When afternoon came, it was freezing rain in the face of a hurricane west wind.
Oh my gosh, this is perfect. I forgot. Oh my gosh, that's right. We're in the middle of a storm in the book, too.
When summertime came, the old cook came on deck saying, fellas, it's too rough to feed you. At 7 p.m. a main hatchway gave in. He said, fellas, it's been good to know you. The captain wired in, he had water coming in, and the good ship and crew was in peril. Later that night, when his lights went out of sight, came the wreck of the Edmund Fitzgerald.
Oh, what a historically powerful song. I absolutely am so grateful that you are here. Good day, ladies and gentlemen. Good day. Happy Friday. Some of us have forgotten about the year time frame, but some of us have not. Representing, I love seeing you. It is a beautiful, beautiful day to be alive, and what a gift it is to be with you again. Ladies and gentlemen, the beautiful part about a Thursday to Friday reading is that you didn't have to wait as long. You get about 4.5 less hours that you have to wait for the following reading. I want to say thank you to my poetry crew. That poetry crew today was Jay Patel, JP Hogard, and Michelle Ellis. Woo! Nice job. I am whooping for you just like Billy whoops for his dogs. Ladies and gentlemen, I don't want to wait any longer. I couldn't stand stopping yesterday. So plain and simple, guess what? It's time to read. Yesterday, we had the second chapter of the championship. Yesterday, we had massive dangers because a huge storm came whipping in and started really putting our boys to the test. Started putting little Ann and little old Dan to the test, but they got an amazing catch. You guys remember? We had one coon from the first hour, like right after this championship started, from chapter 16. Chapter 17, they came up to a box elder snag, chopped that thing down, and how many coons were hiding in it? 3! Oh my gosh. Two of them got taken care of. The other one hopped up and went out of the river bottoms, and the dogs went after. Grandpa, Pa, and the judge believe it's time to head back, that the lives of two dogs are not worth waiting for. Now, Billy is having a real hard time with that, so let's find out what happens. Could we finish the championship today? I don't know. Ladies and gentlemen, chapter 18, Wilson Rawls, Where the Red Fern Grows. Let's begin. Just before dawn, the storm blew itself out with one last angry roar. It started snowing. A frozen silence settled over the canebrake. Back in the thick timber of the river bottoms, the sharp snapping of frozen limbs could be heard. The tall stalks of wild cane looked exhausted from the hellish night. They were drooping and bending from the weight of the frozen sleet. I climbed out a deep gully and listened for my dogs. I couldn't hear them. Just as I started back down the bank, I heard something. I listened. Again, I heard the sound. Papa was watching me. "Can you hear those dogs?" he asked. "No, not the dogs," I said, "but I can hear something else." "What does it sound like?" he asked. "Like someone whooping," I said. Papa and the judge hurried up the bank. We heard the sound again, and it was coming from a different direction. The first time I heard it, I said, "It was over that way." "It's the men from camp," the judge said. "They're searching for us." We started whooping. The searchers answered. Their voices came from all directions. The first one to reach us was Mr. Kyle. He looked haggard and tired. He asked if everything was all right. "Yeah, we're all right," Papa said. "But the old man has a bad ankle. It looks like we'll have to carry him out." "Your team broke loose and came back to camp about midnight," Mr. Kyle said. "This really spooked us. We sure were thinking something bad must have happened to you. 25 of us have been searching ever since then." Several men climbed down the bank and went over to Grandpa. They looked at his ankle. One said, "I don't think it's broken, but it sure is a bad sprain." "You're in luck," another one said. "We have one of the best doctors in the state of Texas over in camp, Dr. Charlie Lathman. He'll have you fixed up in no time." "Yeah," another one said. "If I know Charlie, he's probably got a small hospital with him in his buggy." Back in the crowd, I heard another man say, "You mean that Lathman fellow who owns those black and tan hounds is a doctor?" "Sure is," another one said. "One of the best." Mr. Kyle asked where my dogs were. I told him that they were treed somewhere. "What do you mean, treed somewhere?" he asked. Papa explained what had happened. With a wide-eyed look on his face, he said, "Do you mean to tell me those hounds stayed with the tree in that blizzard?" I nodded. Looking at me, he said, "Son, I hope they have that coon treed, because you need that one to win the cup. Those two walkers tree, but it got bad. All those hunters came in." The judge spoke up. "I'll always believe that those hounds knew that boy needed another coon to win." He said, "If you fellows had seen some of the things those dogs have done, you'd believe it too." One hunter walked over to the broken snag. "3 out of 1 tree," he said. "No wonder. Look here. That old snag was half full of leaves and grass. Why, it's a regular old den tree." Several of the men walked over. I heard one say, "I've seen this happen before. Remember that big hunt in the Red River bottoms? When the 2 little beagle hounds treed 4 coons in an old hollow snag? They won the championship too." I wasn't there, but I remember reading about it. One said, "I wasn't sorry. Say, I don't see Benson," Mr. Kyle said. The men started looking at each other. "He was searching farther downriver than the rest of us," one fellow said. "Maybe he didn't hear us shouting." Some of the men climbed out of the gully. They started whooping. From a distance, we heard an answering shout. "He hear us?" someone said. "He's coming." Everyone looked relieved. Mr. Benson struck the washout a little way above us. He was breathing real hard as if he'd been running. He started talking out as soon as he was within hearing distance. "It scared me when I first saw him," he said. I didn't know what they were. They looked like white ghosts. I'd never seen anything like it." A hunter grabbed Mr. Benson by the shoulder, shaking him. "Get a hold of yourself, man," he said. "What are you talking about?" Mr. Benson took a deep breath to control himself, and he started again in a much calmer voice. "Those two hounds," he said. "I found them. They're frozen solid. They're nothing but white ice from the tips of their noses to the ends of their tails." Hearing Mr. Benson's words, I screamed and ran to my father. Everything started whirling around and around. I felt light as a feather. My knees buckled. I knew no more. Regaining consciousness, I opened my eyes and could dimly see the blurry images of the men around me. A hand was shaking me. I could hear my father's voice, but I couldn't understand his words. Little by little, the blackness faded away. My throat was dry and I was terribly thirsty. I asked for some water. Mr. Benson came over. He said, "Son, I'm sorry. Truly sorry. I didn't mean it that way. Your dogs are alive. I guess I was excited. I'm very sorry." I heard a deep voice say, "That is a heck of a thing to do. Come running in here saying the dogs are frozen solid." Mr. Benson said, I didn't mean it to sound that way. I said, "I'm sorry. What more do you want me to do?" "Did you have a moment thinking that they might have been gone?" "Me too. I was so nervous." The deep voice growled again. "I still think it was a heck of a thing for a man to say." Mr. Kyle looked over. "Now, let's not have any more of this," he said. "We have work to do. We've been standing here acting like a bunch of school kids. All this..." I guess he's making fun of you guys. A bunch of school kids. "We have work to do. We've been standing here acting like a bunch of school kids. All this time, that old man has been lying there suffering. A couple of you men cut 2 poles and make a stretcher to carry him out." While the men were getting the poles, Papa heated the coonskins again and rewrapped Grandpa's foot. With belts and long leather laces from their boots, the hunters made a stretcher. Very gently, they put Grandpa on it. Again, Mr. Kyle took command. "Part of us will start for the camp with him," he said. "The others will go after the dogs." "Here, take this gun," Papa said. "I'll go with them." Looking at me, Mr. Kyle said, "Come on, son. I want to see your hounds." Mr. Benson led the way. "As soon as we get out of this cane," he said, "we may be able to hear them. They have the coon tree and a big black gum tree. You're going to see a sight. Now, I mean a sight. They've walked a ring around that tree, clear down to through the ice and snow. You can see the bare ground." "Wonder why they did that?" someone asked. "I don't know," Mr. Benson replied, "unless they ran in that circle to keep from freezing to death or to keep the coon up that tree." I figured I knew why my dogs were covered with ice. The coon had probably crossed the river, maybe several times. Old Dan and little Ann would have followed him. They had come out of the river with their coats dripping wet, and the freezing blast of the blizzard had done the rest. Can you see that? Can you see his dogs just covered and frozen in white? Isn't that amazing? Isn't that absolutely amazing? Nearing the tree, we stopped and we stared. Did you ever see a thing like that? Mr. Benson asked. When I first saw them, they were white wolves. My dogs hadn't seen us when we came up. They were trotting around and around, just as Mr. Benson had said. We could see the path that they had worn down through the ice and snow till the bare black earth was visible. Like ghostly white shadows, around and around they trotted. In a low voice, someone said, "They know that if they stop, they'll freeze." "It's unbelievable," said Mr. Kyle. "Come on, we must do something quick." With a choking sob, I ran for my dogs. On hearing our approach, they sat down and started bawling treed. I noticed their voices didn't have that solid ring. Their ice-covered tails made a rattling sound as they switched this way and that on the icy ground. A large fire was built. Standing, my dogs close to the warm heat, the gentle hands of the hunters went to work. With handkerchiefs and scarves heated steaming hot, little by little the ice was thawed from their bodies. If they had ever lain down, someone said, they would have frozen to death. They knew it, another said. That's why they kept running in a circle. What I can't understand is why they stayed with the tree. Mr. Benson said, I've seen hounds stay with the tree for a while, but not in a northern blizzard. Men, said Mr. Kyle, people have been trying to understand dogs ever since the beginning of time. One never knows what they'll do. You can read every day where a dog saved the life of a drowning child or laid down his life for his master. Some people call this loyalty. I don't. I may be wrong, but I call it love, the deepest kind of love there is. After these words were spoken, a thoughtful silence settled over the men. The mood was broken by the deep growling voice I had heard back in the washout. It's a shame that people all over the world can't have that kind of love in their hearts, he said. There would be no wars, slaughter, or murder, no greed or selfishness. It would be the kind of world that God wants us to have, a wonderful world. Do you hear that? Do you hear how the author right now is putting in a theme? He has handed you one of the things that he wants you to get out of this. If we could be more like dogs and love the world like that, that's what we're talking about, right? That's why we're here. That's what we're doing. That's why we're sitting here listening for this story, because it's so good. It's got love in it, but a different kind of love, right? Okay, anyway, sorry. After all the ice was thawed for my dogs and their coats were dried out, I could see that they were all right. I was happy again and felt good all over. One of the hunters said, "Do you think those hounds are thawed out enough to fight a coon?" "Sure, just run them out of that tree," I said. At the crack of the gun, the coon ran far out on a big limb and stopped. Again, the hunter sprinkled him with birdshot. You remember birdshot? Those are those little pebbles or the little bullets that are inside the big canister of that 410. It's not going to kill him. It's going to knock him out of the tree, though. The hunter sprinkled him with birdshot. This time he jumped. Hitting the ground, he crouched down. Old Dan made a lunge. Just as he reached him, the coon sprang straight up and came down on his head. Holding on with his claws, the coon sank his teeth in a long, tender ear. Old Dan was furious. He started turning in a circle, bawling with pain. Little Ann was trying hard to get a hold of the coon, but she couldn't. Because of his fast circling, old Dan's feet flew out from under him and he fell. This gave Little Ann her chance. Darting in, her jaws closed on the back of the coon's neck. I knew the fight was over then. Arriving back at camp, see how quickly that happened? We don't need to hear the terrible, sad stuff about the dying of the coon, but we can tell that they got the coon. What does that mean? If they got that coon, how many total do they have? Come on. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Nobody? Y'all busy talking to each other? You're not even doing this stuff. Are you just saying hey to each other and missing the story? I could stop. I could stop. You wouldn't want me to do that. Wrong. 1 the first time, 2 in the eve, and they just got another one. 4. Y'all better listen closer. I'm not impressed. Arriving back at camp, I saw that all the tents had been taken down but ours. A hunter said everyone was in a hurry to get out to see them. I saw tears in my grandfather's eyes as he talked to them. His ankle was wrapped in bandages. His foot and toes were swollen to twice their normal size. They had turned a greenish yellow color. Placing my hand on his foot, I could feel the feverish heat. Dr. Lathman came over. "You ready to go now?" He asked. Snorting and growling, Grandpa said, "I told you I wasn't going anywhere till I see the gold cup handed to this boy." Turning to face the crowd, Dr. Lathman said, "Men, let's get this over with. I want to get this man to town. That's one of the meanest sprains I've ever seen, and it should be in a cast, but I don't have any plaster of Paris with me." The hunter, who had come by our tent collecting the jackpot money, came up to me. Handing me the box, he said, "Here you are, son. There's over $300 in this box. It's all yours." Turning to the crowd, he said, "Fellas, I can always say this. On this hunt, I have seen 2 of the finest little coon hounds I ever hoped to see." There was a roar of approval from the crowd. Looking down, I saw the box was almost full of money. I was shaking all over. I tried to say thanks, but it was only a whisper. Turning, I handed the box to my father. As his rough old hands closed around it, I saw a strange look come over his face. He turned and he looked at my dogs. Some of the men started shouting, "Here it is!" The crowd parted and the judge walked through. I saw the gleaming metal of the gold cup in his hand. After a short speech, he handed it to me, saying, "Son, this makes me so proud. It is a great honor to present you with this championship cup." The crowd exploded. The hunters shouted. Shouts were deafening. I don't know from where the two silly old tears came. They just squeezed their way out. I felt them as they rolled down my cheeks. One dropped on the smooth surface of the cup and splattered. I wiped it away with my sleeve. Turning to my dogs, I knelt down and showed the cup to them. Little Ann licked it. Old Dan sniffed it one time and then turned his head away. The judge said, "Son, there's a place on the cup to engrave the names of your dogs. I can take it into Oklahoma City and have it done, or you can have it done yourself. The engraving charge has already been paid by the association." Looking at the cup, it seemed that far down in the gleaming shadows I could see two wide blue eyes to a window pane. Let me reread that. Looking down at the cup, it seemed that far down in the gleaming shadows I could see two wide blue eyes glued to a window pane. I knew that my little sister was watching the road and waiting for us to return. Looking back at the judge, I said, "If you don't mind, I'll take it with me." My grandfather can send it in for me. Laughing, he said, "That's all right." Handed me a slip of paper, he said, "This is the address where you should send it." Grandpa said, "Now that that's settled, I'm ready to go to town." Turning to Papa, he said, "You'll have to bring the buggy, and I wish you'd look after my stock. I know Grandma will want to go in with us, and there'll be no fuss." Sorry, I need to reread that. "I know Grandma will want to go in with us, and there will be no one there to feed them. Tell Bill Lowry to come up and take care of the store. You'll find the keys in the usual place." Oh, I get it now. Grandpa's getting taken to the hospital. Grandma's going to want to have to come back and go to that hospital. So that means Pa's going to have to go down and get Mr. Bill Lowry to take care of the store and take care of the animals at the farm so that he can take Grandma over and help out with Grandpa. "Well, we'll take care of everything," Papa said. "Don't you worry about a thing. I don't intend to stop until we get back because it looks like we're in for some more bad weather." I went over and kissed Grandpa goodbye. He pinched my cheek and whispered, "We'll teach these city slickers that they can't come up here and beat our dogs." I smiled. Grandpa was carried out and made comfortable in the back of the seat of Dr. Lathman's car. I stood and watched as it wheezed and bounced its way out of sight. "While I'm harnessing the team," Papa said, "you take the tent down and pack our gear up." On the back seat of the buggy, I made a bed out of our bedclothes. Down on the floorboards, I fixed a nice place for my dogs. All through that night, the creaking wheels of our buggy moved on. My father had wrapped a tarp around himself. Reaching down, I could feel my dogs. They were warm and comfortable. Early the next morning, we stopped for breakfast, while Papa turned my dogs loose and let them stretch. "We made good time last night," Papa said. "If everything was right, we'll be home long before dark." Reaching Grandpa's store in the middle of the afternoon, Papa said, "I'll put the team in the barn and feed the stock while you unload the buggy." Coming back from the barn, he said, "In the morning, I'll go over and tell Bill Lowry to come up, and it snowed more here than it did where we were hunting." Feeling big and important, I said, "I don't like the looks of this weather. We'd better be scooting for home." Papa laughed. "Sure you're not in a hurry to get home to show that gold cup off to anyone?" Yes. A smile was my only answer. 200 yards this side of our home, the road made a turn around a low foothill, shutting our house off from view. Papa said, "You're going to see a scramble as soon as we round this bend." It was more of a stampede than a scramble. The little one came out first and all but tore the screen door from its hinges. The older girls passed her just beyond the gate. In her hurry, she slipped and fell face down in the snow. She started crying. Little sisters. The older girls ran up asking for the cup. Holding it high over my head, I said, "Now wait a minute. I've got another one for you two." I held the small silver cup out to them. While they were fighting over it, I ran to the little one. Picking her up, I brushed the snow from her long braided hair and her tear-stained face. I told her there was no use to cry. I had brought the gold cup to her, and no one else was going to get it. Reaching for the cup, she wrapped her small arms around it. Squeezing it up tight, she ran for the house to show it to Mama. Mama came out on the porch. She was just as excited as the girls were. She held out her arms. I ran to her. She hugged me and she kissed me. "It's good to have you home again," she said. "Look what I have, Mama," the little one cried, "and it's all mine." She held the golden cup out in her two small hands. As Mama took the beautiful cup, she looked at me. She started to say something, but was interrupted by the cries from the other girls. "We have one too, Mama," they cried, "and it's just as pretty as that one." "It's not either," the little one piped in, defiant voice. "It's not even as big as mine." "Two cups?" Mama exclaimed. "Did you win too?" "Yes, Mama," I said. Little Ann won the one all by herself. The odd expression on my mother's face was wonderful. Holding a cup in each hand, she held them out in front of her. "Two," she said. "A gold one and a silver one. Who would have thought anything so wonderful could have happened to us? I am so proud, so very proud of you." Handing the cups back to the girls, she walked over to Papa. After kissing him, she said, "I just can't believe everything that has happened. I am so glad you went along. Did you enjoy yourself?" With a smile on his face, Papa almost shouted, "Enjoy myself? Why, I never had such a time in my life." His voice trailed off to a low calm. "That is, except for one thing. Grandpa had a pretty bad accident." "Yes, I know," Mama said. "One of Tom Logan's boys was at the store when they arrived. He came by and told us all about it. The doctor said it wasn't as bad as it looked, and he was pretty sure Grandpa would be home in a few days." I was happy to hear this news, and could tell by the pleased look on my father's face he was glad to hear it too. On entering the house, Papa said, "Oh, I almost forgot." He handed the box of money to Mama. "What's this?" she asked. "Oh, just a little gift from old Dan and little Ann," Papa said. Mama opened the box. I saw the color drain from her face. Her hands started trembling. Turning her back to us, she walked over and set it on the mantel. A peaceful silence settled over the room. I could hear the clock ticking away. The fire in the fireplace crackled and popped. Turning from the mantel, Mama looked straight at us. Her lips were tightly pressed together to keep them from quivering. Walking slowly to Papa, she buried her face in his chest. I heard her say, "Thank God my prayers had been answered." There was a celebration in our home that night. To me, it was like a second Christmas. Mama opened a jar of huckleberries and made a large cobbler. Cobbler. It's so delicious. Oh my gosh. Mama opened a jar of huckleberries and made a large cobbler. Papa went to the smokehouse and came back with a hickory cured ham. We sat into a feast of ham, huge plates of fried potatoes, ham gravy, hot cornbread, fresh butter, and wild bee honey. During the course of the meal, the entire story of the championship hunt was told, some by Papa, but mostly by me. Just when everything was so perfect and peaceful, an argument sprang up between the two oldest girls. It seemed that each wanted to claim the silver cup. Just when they were on the verge of sawing it in two, so each would have her allotted share, Papa settled the squabble by giving the oldest one a silver dollar. Once again, peace and harmony was restored. That night, I was preparing for bed. A light flashed by my window. Puzzled, I tiptoed over and peeked through the pane. It was Mama, carrying my lantern and two large plates heaped high with food. She was heading for the doghouse. Setting the light down on the ground in front of it, she called to my dogs. While they were eating, Mama did something I couldn't understand. She knelt down on her knees and began to pray. After they had eaten their food, Mama started petting them. I could hear her voice, but I couldn't make out her words. Whatever she was saying must have pleased them. Little Ann wiggled and twisted. Even old Dan wagged his long red tail, which was very unusual. Papa came out. I saw him put his arm around Mama. Side by side, they stood for several minutes looking at my dogs. When they turned to enter the house, I saw Mama dab at her eyes with her apron. Lying in bed, staring into that darkness, I tried hard to figure out the strange actions of my parents. Why had Mama knelt in prayer in front of my dogs? Why had she wept? I was running all the whys around in my mind when I heard them talking. I know, Papa said, but I think there's a way. I'm going to have a talk with Grandpa. I don't think that old foot of his is ever going to be the same again. He's going to need some help around the store. I knew they were talking about me, but I couldn't understand what they meant. Then I thought, why, that's it. They want me to help Grandpa. That'd be all right with me. I could still hunt every night. Feeling smart for figuring out their conversation, I turned over and I fell asleep. End of chapter 18. Sorry, Jay Patel. But I have spent 31 minutes, and as promised and as always, I'm going to keep my word. One chapter of this book a day. 30 minutes is about as much time as I can make sure that I read, and about as much time as I want you to take your Friday sitting around listening to a story. I am so amazed at what has occurred in this chapter. It's an amazing, amazing story. What grabs you the most? Was it the frozen dogs that you almost thought that maybe they were frozen solid like it said? Was it the fact that they had treed that coon and won the championship? Was it the gold cup being handed over to Billy? Was it the $300 that he was given in a box raised by all the hunters? Was it Mama's reaction to the win? Or was it Billy thinking that he's figured all this stuff out and knows that he's just going to be going over and helping Grandpa? All I have to tell you is this. It's Friday. We are almost ready to end this book. We have got 3 chapters left. Monday at 3, Monday at 3:30, Tuesday at 3:30, Wednesday at 3:30. And then we have to choose a new book. I've gotten a couple recommendations, a couple pretty good recommendations for that matter. Remember, yesterday, chapter 17, and the day before, chapter 16, there is an invitation for you to email me any requests. The survey is going to be sent out on Monday, and it's going to be waiting for everybody who has participated in this. And I want you to give me an idea of which books we should read. I hope you have a wonderful weekend. I can't thank you enough for loving this book as much as I do. Thanks for participating, and thanks for being so involved. I love you. It's really nice to be with you. It takes some of the loneliness out of this, and reading a good book can do the same thing. So go find your own. Go read like crazy. Do something amazing. Hopefully, maybe all of us can get foot and start playing around outside and puffing up our soles of our feet. And again, I want to wish you the very, very best. My thoughts are with you. I love you. Now get out of here.